After being hospitalized and then recuperating at my parents' house due to an illness caught from my husband, I returned to our apartment after a long time to find a pile of mail. Among them was a termination notice for my husband, Sean. What had happened? I tried calling him. Mary? What's up, calling in the middle of the day? Ah, just something I need to talk about. Where are you now? At work? I'm on a business trip in Seattle today. You got something to say? I'm in a meeting, call me later. Okay. I reflexively responded weakly, and the call ended. This is ridiculous. What is he doing? Confused, I called my former boss. After hearing the story, my boss was surprised and explained. And then he said, Mary Ingram, are you planning to stay at your parents' house? Yes. I'm thinking of divorcing him. I see. How about we join forces? I felt a flame of retaliation against Sean ignite inside me. My name is Mary Ingram, a 38-year-old housewife. Though I'm not currently working or doing part-time work. What do you call a housewife recuperating at her parents' house? About 6 months ago, I collapsed at work and was rushed to the hospital for surgery. The post-surgery recovery was good, but due to various reasons, I left the company I was working at. Now, I'm spending my days recuperating at my parents' house in the neighboring state. I used to work at the same trading company as my husband, Sean. I met Sean 10 years ago. He was a promising member of the sales department, and I was in the administration department. We had no particular interaction before. But for some reason, we started dating after the company's New Year party. In this large company, it was customary to rent a hotel hall for a standing party. The start of our relationship was when we both won a bingo game during the party. 2 years later, we got married. Maybe my age, being close to 30, played a part in deciding to marry. He came to my parents' house, a traditional woodcraft shop in the neighboring state, to ask for their blessing. At that time, my brother, for years my senior, said, "If you make her unhappy, I won't let you off." I still remember his intimidating presence. My brother was already married, and his wife cheerfully called me a sister complex because she was always sweet and worried about me. Yes, I was born and raised in such a home. My parents, grandparents, my brother and his wife, and their children. And that's not all. We also had craftsmen living with us. Our family property is vast. In fact, it's backed by a forest. I always loved the sound of the forest leaves rustling in the wind and the clacking of the leaves hitting each other. I would have liked to become a craftsman too, but unfortunately, I was clumsy. And also not very strong. Working with hardwoods is quite a task. Our family handles everything from delicate softwood crafts to sturdy hardwood works. My father is well known in the area for his delicate crafts. His delicate work is truly beautiful. On the other hand, my brother, following in our grandfather's footsteps, works with sturdy and rough cuts of redwood works. The difference lies in the pre-processing of the hardwoods and softwoods. My father prepares and stores softwoods into small and large pieces before carving to make variety of works. But that's not all. He once created a large sculpture for a city commission. It was impressive, a mix of delicacy and boldness. Meanwhile, my brother's hardwood works are mainly practical items. Like furnitures, sturdy tables, chests, and wardrobe closets. Sometimes people specially order items that were common in the past but are no longer made. Recreating things that were common in the old era but have since disappeared. My brother grew up watching our grandfather's work and chose this path over my father's. His furniture is truly amazing, as he deftly cuts maple and walnut wood to exact sizes and fits them together without nails. His work is truly admirable. But Mary, don't get too close just because it's interesting. My brother often warned me. When I asked why, he explained. Maple and walnut are really hard to cut, you'll cut yourself if you're not careful. My brother's hands had become tough from years of training, resistant to cuts. But I remember cutting my finger on a saw in trying to help my brother. He made quite a fuss over it. If I hadn't been so clumsy, I would have made them too. Before that, you didn't have the physical strength. Indeed, that was true. Harvesting, carrying, cutting, peeling. These tasks require a significant amount of physical strength. That was another reason I gave up. Because I gave up, I found a job outside and eventually got married. But now, I wonder if that marriage was ever really going well. About 6 months ago, I fell ill. I had some signs of physical discomfort. But I couldn't quite bring myself to tell Sean, who was always busy. Not just Sean. It was also my in-laws. We had been married for 7 to 8 years without having children. My kind in-laws always said, children are a blessing, it can't be helped. And I didn't want to worry them even more. Both of us were busy with our jobs, and I never brought up starting a family. No, I didn't even want to. So maybe that's why we never had kids. I was almost resigned to that and had been neglecting to go for gynecological checkups. Then one day, I suddenly collapsed at work with severe abdominal pain, fever, and low blood pressure. When I came to, I was in a hospital bed. My body aching from the anesthesia. The doctor said I had developed peritonitis. I was rushed to the hospital for emergency surgery. I was shocked by what had happened to me. Sure, my health hadn't been great. Especially regarding gynecological issues. I always had difficult periods, so I thought the discomfort was just part of that. But I was wrong. Chlamydia, you say? An unexpected STD. And the illness that followed from it. Cervicitis and then inflammation in the pelvic area leading to peritonitis. The doctor said I had realized it too late. Then Sean was also urgently tested positive. In his case, he just hadn't developed any symptoms. Ever since I got married, no, even a few years before that, I hadn't been involved with any other men. And the symptoms started appearing about 1 to 2 years ago. If that's the case, the only person who could be responsible is Sean. Sean did say it was tough when I was hospitalized, but he never mentioned anything more than that. Yet, here I was, now definitely unable to have children because of this. I was frustrated, but at that time, I still hadn't confronted him about it. It was easy to accuse him of picking up something from somewhere. But at that time, I didn't have the courage. I tried to force myself to believe that even if it was one night stand, he was just venting his pent-up greed in the midst of his busy schedule. How naive I was to think that way, I realized later. After all, he had been with someone else. And during my hospital stay, I was mostly in a daze. The fact that I had contracted an STD and had become infertile weighed heavily on me. I had given up on having children. But that was because our relationship as a couple had faded, not because of any physical issues. I never thought it would be my body that put a stop to it. I spent my days in the hospital, gloomily lying in bed. Often staring out the window for no reason. My mother came from the neighboring state to be with me, but given the nature of my illness, we both ended up speaking very little. Then one day, Sean contacted me to say he was coming to visit. I wondered why he was coming during the day, but I was happy. I had been hospitalized and on leave from work for a while. Apart from my mother, I hadn't seen any familiar faces. My boss had visited once, but the conversation was somewhat awkward, as he hesitated to talk about my illness. My colleagues from the same department were probably busy since I was absent. So, no one visited me. That was understandable. Still, I was very lonely at that time. So I waited eagerly for Sean's arrival, peering out the window. I watched each bus that entered, scrutinizing each person getting off. Then, a car stopped in front of the hospital and a familiar figure got out. It was Sean. Had he gotten a ride from a colleague? As I watched, I gasped. Sean walked around to the driver's side of the car and kissed a woman through the window. Then, as he walked away, the woman in the car leaned out slightly and waved at him. I told myself it was a mistake, a stranger, my eyes must have been playing tricks on me. While thinking this, I returned to my bed. Soon, Sean came in and asked how I was feeling today. I suppressed the urge to ask why he was here and engaged in conversation with him. However, strangely, he never mentioned my illness. He must have been informed about it. And as my husband, he was instructed by the doctor to take medication, since he was likely the source of the infection. Yet, he never steered the conversation in that direction. He didn't apologize to me, not even a single word. His attitude of concern seemed overly confident. I couldn't understand what he was thinking. That's why I couldn't bring myself to ask Sean about what I had seen outside the window. Even if I confronted him, I was sure Sean would just brush it off nonchalantly. I was convinced of that. And after Sean left, I had nothing much to do but rest and think. I thought about my life so far. and what lay ahead. And about Sean. Was he really always so busy with work that he couldn't come home? Why didn't he seem to want children? And what about the future? And now what? How could I face his kind parents and tell them I can't have children anymore? The cause was undoubtedly Sean, but I kept blaming myself. Then one day, my brother and sister-in-law came to visit. They came to give my mother, who had been with me all this time, a break. "You look surprisingly well, Mary," my sister-in-law said, embracing me. "When we heard you collapsed and had emergency surgery, we were all in a panic," my brother said, holding some personal items my mother had asked him to bring. "That was terrible. How is he doing?" he said, looking around with disgust. "His work is as busy as ever. He's the head of the sales department, after all." "But still," my brother seemed dissatisfied. "Hey Mary, how about you don't go back to your place right after you're discharged? Why don't you come stay with us for a while? Dad and Mom are worried about you being alone at home." "That's right. You can just relax and have your meals brought to you for a while." I thought that might be a good idea. I didn't think it was good for me to be alone and lost in thought. After being discharged, I moved some of my personal items and my computer from my house to my brother's place. I explained to Sean that I wanted to recuperate for a while, and also that I was quitting my job. "Yeah, you should take it easy." His response seemed so distant for such a significant matter. And still, I couldn't ask him. Where did Sean pick up the disease? How much had he played around before we got married? Or even after? Who was the person who drove him in that car? There were so many things I wanted to ask. But at that time, I was too afraid to ask. Back at my parents' house, I started sleeping in one of the small detached houses. At my parents' home, there are several small detached houses just for sleeping. It's meant for young craftsmen to live in. Our family home, located in a rural area of the neighboring state away from the city center, was too remote for young craftsmen to commute to. It's located in an environment somewhat removed from populated areas. You needed a car for any shopping trip. I didn't have a driver's license, so my sister-in-law would take me with her when she went out. My parents said I could sleep in the main house, but there were my brother's 3 children there. A girl and 2 boys, all in elementary school and full of energy. In this area, the kids needed to race up hills on their bikes to meet with their neighborhood friends. When those kids come back home, they create quite a commotion together with their siblings. It was painful for me to see these lively kids. Knowing that having my own children was now impossible. I loved kids. And because I loved them, I didn't want to see them much right now. So, after meals, I would retreat to the detached house and started organizing things on my computer. Since there was no TV except in the main house, I began watching videos online, which I hadn't done much before. Eventually, I discovered that videos of natural landscapes were surprisingly popular. On a whim, I decided to record the rustling of the leaves and the clacking sounds of the maple nodes hitting each other with my smartphone and uploaded it to social media. Surprisingly, the response was not bad. People commented that the sound was good. So, I decided to try starting a video streaming channel. Despite being new to it, the response wasn't bad. Maybe, like me, others also found healing in the midst of this forest. I started collecting equipment little by little from my savings, gathering images and sounds. At night, I edited them and posted a new video every few days. This activity seemed to gradually heal me. At first, my parents and brother's family were puzzled about what I was doing. One day, I showed them my videos and the responses they received. My brother clapped his hands and said, "Hey, why don't you do our PR?" According to him, we had regular customers. And there was always a demand. But the craftsman who came to us had found us somewhat by chance. He wanted me to showcase our products and the work environment, to let people know what we have here. But why didn't you do something like this before? You think we could handle something like that? Come to think of it, even though we have internet connectivity, it's the kind of area where the kids hardly ever play video games. Even in this era, there are certainly people who are disconnected from modern trends. I quickly agreed to the proposal and officially became part of the workshop team. But that means I have to talk to him once. That's true. Everyone agreed. So, I decided to return to my home once. But when I did, I was surprised. Even though I had lived in the city center for quite a long time, it felt so different just a little distance away. I noticed that the air was completely different. As I entered the apartment, I saw a pile of mail overflowing from the mailbox. I gathered them and went upstairs to my apartment. It had been almost 6 months since I was hospitalized and left the apartment empty. Maybe that's why the air inside felt so unfamiliar. Or rather different. It was uncomfortable. I dropped the mail on the living room table and opened the window. I needed to air out the room. A room takes on a unique smell when people live in it. This room no longer had the smell of when Sean and I lived here. On impulse, I went to the bedroom. As soon as I opened the door, I instinctively covered my nose and mouth. There was the scent of another woman, not mine. Oh no, how awful. Disgusted, I quickly closed the door and returned to the living room. I slumped into a chair and rested my head on the table. That's when one of the pieces of mail caught my eye. It was from the company. Perhaps they sent me a tax document I'd need after resigning? As I picked it up, I noticed there were 2 identical envelopes. One was addressed to me, and the other to Sean. I opened mine first. Inside, as expected, was a tax document. But there was more. Notice of company bankruptcy and absorption procedures. Bankruptcy? Wait a minute. I stared intently at the words. How had that large company gone bankrupt so suddenly? And there is another one. Then, hesitantly, I opened the other envelope, addressed to Sean. I shouldn't be opening someone else's mail. I knew it. But my curiosity got the better of me. If it was similar news, wouldn't Sean have received it in person at work? If it was similar news, wouldn't Sean have received it in person at work? Inside the envelope was a termination notice. The company had gone bankrupt. But it was not a small office. It was a large company with many employees in each department. Even if it had gone bankrupt, wouldn't there be a merging entity to absorb the employees? I felt something bubbling up inside me and decided to call Sean. Since moving back to my parents' house, we had exchanged messages occasionally, but I hardly ever called him directly. But I knew I had to call him now. After a few rings, he answered. Mary? What's up, calling in the middle of the day? His voice sounded slightly irritated. Just something I need to talk about. Where are you now? At work? I'm on a business trip in Seattle today. You got something to say? Yes. A business trip? What is he talking about? I'm in a meeting, call me later. Okay. I reflexively responded weakly and the call ended. A business trip? A meeting? I was confused. After thinking for a bit, I called my former boss. And it was surprised at how quickly he answered. This is Mary Ingram. It's been a while. Mary! I could hear noisy voices in the background. My former boss moved to a quieter spot. And then started speaking again. What's up? We sent you your tax document a little while back. No, I've been at my parents' house for quite some time and just came back today for some errands. Oh, I see. Yes. And today, I noticed the mail from you, about my husband's termination notice? Huh? My former boss seemed unsure how to respond. Mary, you didn't know? Know what? Sean, he leaked confidential client information to a rival company. I was shocked. The story my former boss was telling sounded like a joke to me, who had been quietly recuperating at my parents' house. I've been resting at home, so this is really shocking news to me. I heard an exasperated sigh. My former boss explained that Sean had been rumored to be involved with Yvonne, a secretary in his department. At the same time Sean disappeared from the company, Yvonne also vanished. Evidence of information leakage was found on Yvonne's computer. So, Sean was involved with Yvonne? It might be the other way around. The girls in the secretary department said Yvonne had a boyfriend outside the company. A honey trap? Then the woman who drove Sean to the hospital that time. Could it have been Yvonne? I just called my husband earlier. Did he answer? My former boss sounded surprised. Sean must not be answering calls from the company, I thought. He said he was on a business trip in Seattle with a client. I see. My former boss seemed deep in thought. Mary, are you planning to stay at your parents' house for the foreseeable future? Yes. I came back to talk to him about that. I paused. Once I say this, everything will be over. I'm thinking of divorcing him. I see. How about we join forces then? What my former boss proposed next was very appealing. I checked for missing items in the room, took what I needed, and first headed to the municipal office to get divorce papers. However, I took 2 copies at this time. I signed and stamped one and left it on the table. It wasn't to be used as is. It was just a statement of my intentions. On top of it, I placed the envelope with the termination notice. I also bought a slightly better camera and microphone on the way back. My sister-in-law, who came to pick me up at the station, said, "I was surprised you were back the same day. What happened?" "It's a long story, I'll tell you later." "Really? But you seem kind of excited." "Am I? Maybe I am. I must be somewhat exhilarated." And when I got back home, I immediately told my family about the proposal from my former boss. Everyone at home showed their anger towards Sean when they heard the story. "What is that? That's awful." "So, you're planning to divorce him, huh?" "Yes." The other woman's scent was all over that room. "I don't know where he is now, but I don't think he's seen the termination notice. Maybe he's running away? But what will you do? There's a chance he might not come back, right? He hasn't blocked my calls yet. Seems like he's blocking calls from the company, though." Then, I told everyone about my former boss's proposal. "That's great. So, we can do it here, right? Should I tell our young workers too?" "Please do." Despite everything, he's actually quite cowardly. About half a month later, Sean and Yvonne finally came to our family home. Well, more like they were brought here. They were guided to the porch and arrived there. In the spacious living room, there were craftsmen wearing our workshop coats, along with my parents and my brother and his wife. The lawyer I hired for the divorce was already waiting. The former boss, a lawyer associated with the company. Sean, Yvonne, and another man arrived. All 3 of them looked solemn. But while Sean and Yvonne's faces were filled with fear, the other man seemed angry. First, let's discuss the divorce case of the Ingram couple. My lawyer began, confronting Sean with the reasons for the divorce. First was his affair with Yvonne. When Mary called the other day, "Sean, you said you were in Seattle on business. But at that time, you had already been fired from the company. Are you saying that's proof of the affair?" "No, that's just an added detail." "An added detail?" "Yes. The affair is one reason for the divorce, but what Mary is most concerned about is that Sean transmitted a sexually transmitted disease to her." "Wait, a sexually transmitted disease?" At that moment, Yvonne made a silly voice. "What do you mean by that?" Didn't you know about it?" I asked Yvonne in a calm tone. "What do you mean?" "You drove this man to visit me in the hospital, didn't you?" How did you?" "Ah, so you were the one driving that car then." "Poor you." "What do you mean, poor me?" "Because I was hospitalized due to chlamydia, which I got from him, and it worsened into peritonitis." "Chlamydia, you say?" Yvonne suddenly turned to look at Sean, apparently understanding what that meant. "Yes, and as a result, I have become completely infertile." "But you're still young, so if you had such a relationship with him, you should get treated soon, right?" "What? What?" Sweat broke out on Yvonne's face. She looked around at the 2 men. "Why didn't you tell me about this?" Yvonne murmured resentfully at Sean. I had already started taking medication by then." "What? You started taking it when you went to see your wife, right? So what about me?" "So, you were involved before then?" The lawyer interjected calmly. Well, that's how it is, Yvonne." The other man glared at them with disgust. "I definitely told this guy to get information, but I never said to bring back a disease." "And you are?" I asked. "Well, now it's my turn to explain." My former boss leaned forward. "This is Turner, the assistant manager at the headquarters of the company that absorbed our recently bankrupt company." Turner shook my hand firmly. "Why is Mr. Turner here?" "That's because—" "No, let me explain. I was using Yvonne, whom I was dating, to gather information about your company." So you and Yvonne were spying? Yes. It's just an excuse from a scoundrel, but I never instructed her to do anything specific. Indeed, as the person himself said, it's just an excuse of a scoundrel. So, Yvonne was involved with Sean to that extent? I had considered it as a possibility, but I was dating her after all. He probably didn't think she would go that far. As a result, the sales information Sean had brought us considerable benefits. In short, part of the reason our company went under is right here. My former boss said bitterly. Well, actually, this company absorbed ours, so aside from the top management, there wasn't much damage. In fact, it seems like it might be better than the previous upper management. Is that so? I sighed in relief, thinking of my former colleagues. But indeed, taking this approach was a mistake. What goes around comes around, Mr. Turner said with a wry smile. Perhaps, Mr. Turner. Yes, unfortunately. I've been feeling unwell lately and got tested, and sure enough. Yvonne gasped in shock, her eyes widening. That's right. You transmitted it to me. So, Yvonne started trembling. Well, at least it was found early. But how long have you two been involved? Anything gynecological come to mind? No. After mumbling for a while, Yvonne suddenly swung her hand and slapped Sean's face. What are you doing? Shut up. It's your fault. Why didn't you tell me? That's because, well, it's a difficult disease to talk about. My lawyer interjected. We don't know where it was contracted, but it's clear that Sean transmitted the disease to Mary. The primary reason for the divorce will be that. We will be seeking a divorce and alimony from Sean. Not for the affair? The affair is obviously included. You brought the disease from someone else. But what if Mary had it? At least until I gave up on children, I frequently visited the gynecologist to make sure there were no issues with me. Indeed, there weren't many occasions for intimacy, but it wasn't non-existent. It took about a year from infection to becoming this severe, I was told. Just about when I gave up on children and started skipping the gynecologist. You were always away on business trips or whatever. I don't know where you were or what you were doing, but you were obviously with someone else, weren't you? Our company records show that we didn't assign you that many business trips at that time. My former boss added. Also, we are planning to sue you and Yvonne for leaking confidential business information. That's why we brought the lawyer associated with our company here. What, me too? Of course. Wasn't that what you were originally asked to do? But well, regarding Yvonne's case, we do bear some responsibility. We can defend her to some extent on that matter. However, I cannot forgive you, Sean, for what you did even as a lover. Why? I just did it because I thought it was best for you. Do you think engaging in such activities for my sake is acceptable? There were smarter ways to handle it. But I thought that was the best approach for this man. I heard rumors he wasn't getting along with his wife and was a regular at prostitution. And when I approached him, he fell for it so easily. You were using me with that intention? Of course. My real target was always Turner. What do you think, getting serious about a married old man like you? At that moment. Stop this nonsense. My father shouted, silencing everyone. What are you all babbling about? Our craftsman stood straight, glaring at the disgraceful trio. Sean! Mary clearly doesn't want to be with you anymore. Just get the divorce done with. Father-in-law. Yes, I already informed your parents yesterday. Seems like you've been running away from your own home too. Oh. Your parents said they won't help you at all. What, really? Now, please sign this. My lawyer presented another divorce paper in front of Sean. That's when it happened. No! Suddenly, Sean screamed loudly, stood up, and ran out barefoot onto the porch. Chase him! My father commanded my brother and the craftsman. Their movements, honed from regular physical work, were swift. We moved to the porch, watching the men run through the spacious yard, which also served as a workshop area, towards the bamboo forest. Then one of them shouted, "Young master." At that moment, there was a loud clatter. Sean had stumbled over a pile of recently cut softwoods. Help me! Freshly cut cedar, still heavy with water, fell on Sean. if 20 or 30 of those fell on someone. I sighed deeply. After that, Sean breaking his leg and suffering multiple bruises. He suffered bruises all over. Our divorce went through smoothly. I sold the condo we lived in to pay off the alimony in one go. After all, Sean had more financial troubles ahead with the claims for damages from my former bosses. It was going to court, and it was unclear how long it would take or how much he would have to pay. As he was injured and in the midst of a lawsuit, Sean struggled to find a job. As for Yvonne, she panicked when she found early symptoms of chlamydia at a gynecological clinic. She, too, was fired from her job and faced a lawsuit for damages. Turner had found a lawyer for her, but their relationship had ended. Hearing all this, I was utterly dismayed at Sean's attempts to brush off the disease. Afterward, I started working as a PR staff for my family's business, alongside video streaming. I enjoyed promoting my father's delicate crafts and my brother's robust practical items every day. I even began filming children doing simple bamboo crafts. Thinking about my health still pained me. But I couldn't wallow in it forever. My forest videos were popular, receiving comments from both domestic and international viewers. People everywhere enjoyed the sounds I loved. This became my new passion. Recently, I've also been having personal talks with one of the craftsmen. I'm not thinking about remarriage or anything, but who knows what the future holds. The forest always offers new sounds every day. I want to continue enjoying these peaceful days.